We're talking about the forces that shape human behavior. I believe that all human behavior is lawful. That the reactions and values that all people have are perfectly lawful to the environment that they come from. So every human being is perfectly well adjusted from where they are coming from their background and experience. If you as a baby were raised by the Seminole Indians, you would behave, if you never saw anything else, like a Seminole Indian. And if you were brought up at any other Indian group and you had feathers in your head, in your hat, in your headgear, and you were dancing around the fire, and I walked over and said, "That's ridiculous. What are you dancing around the fire with the feathers for?" You don't take your hat, throw it on the ground, and say, "You know, I never thought of it that way." We can't do that. We're victims of culture. We look at the world with our background. We have no other way of doing it. Psychology is kind of a rudimentary form today, an attempt to grasp at the factors that shape human behavior, the factors that are responsible for the way we look at ourselves, other people, and the way we behave, or, if you wish, misbehave. I don't believe that any human being misbehaves. They use whatever tools they know of, whatever tools they're familiar with. How is it that we want our social system to operate? What makes criminal behavior? What are the factors that make a Jeffrey Dahmer? I'm sure you know who that was. Before Jeffrey, there was Albert Fish. I don't know if any of you remember Albert Fish. Albert Fish was a fine-looking gentleman. He ate 45 children. Well, you wonder, how can anyone do that kind of thing? I'm going to try to give you some idea of the background of Albert Fish. When he was a youngster, about 10 years old, he was touching his private parts. His mother was an old-time Baptist, and she says, "You are going straight to hell. You will burn eternally." And that kid, Albert Fish, stuck needles into his genitals because he didn't want to burn in hell. And he took other children into empty lots and cut off their private parts because he wanted to save them. If you're brought up in a distorted environment, which we all live in today, any judge that raps the gavel and says 30 years is an ignoramus because he has no idea of the factors that shape human behavior. When you become aware, if you bring up a healthy boy with about 6 women, and one of the girls says, "Oh, did I see a gorgeous hat?" that boy will pick up the same mannerisms, same facial expressions, and say, "Oh, I just love that hat." Because if that's the environment, and you're brought up in Italy, you say, "Hey, what's the matter? You like or you don't like?" In other words, it depends on where you're brought up. Did you know that Lincoln was Irish? It depends on your group and the values that you exchange. Just before the public library in the United States, people said, "Well, you can't really do that. The people never bring back the books. They'll keep them. They won't return them." Of course, all that was incorrect. I want to build a library where any child can walk in, check out a camera, check out art materials, check out water skis, make things available. People don't steal. No one's going to hit you on the head to take your watch off if it's available. Well, how are you going to pay for this central library that gives children these things for nothing? Well, it cost about $50,000 to keep a kid in jail 1 year. An adult, $75,000 a year. Food, clothing, shelter, dental care. Isn't it easier to do it in a different way? I would love to go to Mexico and say, "What's your problem?" They say, "Well, senor, we don't have the modern machinery you have." Give them modern machinery. Build schools for them. And they won't be coming over the border. What makes them come over the border? Hunger, lack of employment. They say, "Oh, it's the goddamn Mexicans, you know what they're like." Oh, there's nothing like that. Everything is shoved by something else. You are told that a tree falls over. You were told that a sailboat sails. A sailboat cannot sail unless acted upon by a resident force called the wind. A tree does not fall. If it rains and it's asymmetric and the soil becomes loose, gravity does the rest. The tree doesn't fall. Plants do not grow. They require radiant energy, nutrients, water. Stop any of those things and the plant stops. Human beings are not self-operating entities. We are operated by many resident forces. Of course, many of us are not aware of that. It looks like we're perfectly free, making our own decisions. I know I think for myself. I'm sure you do. That's an illusion. When you break the patterns that have been established by existing society, you begin to move people in a new direction. Now, a psychologist in one session said that, well, I know two children that came from the same environment, and if environment is everything, one turned out to be a gangster, the other a minister. If environment is everything, how do you get those differences? The minute you pick up one child and start playing with it, and the other stands there with that lip out, you're making jealousy and envy. There's no such thing as the same environment. So when I pick up my little girl, I pick up my older little boy. You never work with one child. Why can't you keep your area clean? Your brother does all the time. You leave all your things around. Well, when he trips and falls down the stairs, his brother smiles. An inhibited smile, of course. But he does smile. So we build these artificialities in the world we live in today.
I find your views about the future interesting, but how do you account for human nature?
How do I account for what?
Human nature.
Human nature. Human nature is the way people have found other people to behave over many long years. They appear to manifest greed, jealousy, envy, even animals. If you take a cat and put it on your lap in the presence of the dog may growl. And a psychologist, that's what I mean by the nature of the beast. So I said, come on down to my lab in about a week. So I picked up my cat, put it on my lap, and the dog's tail starts wagging. Because you reinforce the dog before you pick up the cat and put it. The cat is a threat to the dog's security. The dog wants you to pet it, not the cat. So you give the dog these ambivalent feelings. But you can have 15 kids in the room without jealousy, without envy. It is not human nature. It's human behavior that's shaped by culture. If, like I said, if you were brought up in China years ago, you'd walk with your hands in your sleeves and shuffle and wear a long pigtail. And so, well, that's human nature. That's not. That's the influence of environment on your behavior. Dancing is the same thing. Dances change over a period of time. Music changes over time. So there is really no human nature. Think about it. Toss it around. There is varying degrees of human behavior. If we wish to understand the factors that generate our value system, that generate the way we look at the world, we have to go back in time and study these things.